All right, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Basra Daf Lamed as well as Lamed Aleph Amid Aleph. We're starting 6 or 7 lines from the bottom of Chav Tes Amid Beis at the word Hahuda Amar Leila Chabre, and we'll be stopping on Lamed Aleph Amid Aleph 6 lines from the bottom of the page at the 2 dots. We are going to learn 7 cases of Chazaka, and then we will call it a night. The cases are short, sweet, confined, a relatively easy daf. Says the Gemara on the bottom of Chav Tes Amid Beis, 6 lines from the bottom. Ahuda Amar Leila Chabre. I say to you, my bayis b'hai besa, what are you doing in my house? And the guy responded, the squatter responded, Amar le minach zvinte, I bought it from you. Ve'achlis shnei chazaka. Not only did I buy it from you, but I've actually been here for the amount of time that it takes to do a chazaka, which is 3 years. So back off. Amar le, okay, look, I understand you've been living in the house, but there's a logistical problem with your squatting. Ana bishchune gavoy havoy. I was living in the inner sanctum of the house, the basement, an inner room, whatever the case may be. So yes, you might have been squatting, but no, you haven't been alone because I've been here the whole time. So, but of course, the guy on the outside never saw him. Otherwise, he would have said, like, what are you doing here? I didn't, they would have talked about it. So also Rav Nachman. They brought the Shaila, they brought this case in front of Rav Nachman. Amar le zil beror achilascha. He says to the squatter, you need to prove your shita. Let's take a look at our first Rashbam that we're learning together. The Rashbam is 10 lines or so, 15, 12 lines, whatever, from the bottom of the page. Dibra maschel amar le lemachzik. He said to the squatter, zil beror achilascha. Have edim, you, the squatter, need to bring witnesses. Shedarta bebais levadcha gimel shanim. Below also shebaimach. You need to bring witnesses, squatter, that you were in fact alone for those 3 years. That's Shitas Rav Nachman. Rava argues. Amar le Rava. Rava says to Rav Nachman, Hachi dina? Absolutely not. Hamotzi mechavero olav haraya. We have a Shas concept that's being applied over here. Who's trying to take away from who? You have the owner of the home who's trying to get the squatter off of his property. The guy's been living there for years. So the Maisa, well, what they should do is they should say, that's true in this case. You finally got it right for the first time in 1700 block. Very good. Yeah, I knew I was going to get you back at some point. I didn't know how sweet the revenge would be. But it's quite good. So that's Rava disagrees. He's like, no, what do you mean that the din is on the machzik, on the squatter? The din shouldn't be on the squatter. It should be hamotz mechaver al-varaya. It should be on the owner of the house because he was gone for 3 years. Don't come to me crying after 3 years. No, that's not right. So they argue with one another. And it's interesting because while they have this machlokes over here, there's another shita, there's another case, I should say, where Rava and Rav Nachman flip their shitas. That's why the Gemara says, the Rami de Rava a Rava. We have a problem of this Rava with another Rava. This Rava said that it should be the requirement of the balabas to be motzi from the squatter. And Rami de Rav Nachman ad Rav Nachman, and our Rav Nachman over here who says that it's the responsibility of the squatter. So he actually contradicts himself. Where is this case? Last word on Chav Tes Amid Beis. De'ahu de'amar le lechabre. You and I go into business together. And I say, Kol nichse, all of the properties, debei bar sisin, that belong to the house of bar sisin, mazvin alach. It's a group of properties that are called bar sisin. And havai hahi ara. So let's say there were 10 pieces of property, but there was an 11th piece of property to have a mikri debei bar sisin. It also had the same name, but it wasn't intended to be included. Let's say, for example, I say, every house in the city of Chicago that says 123 Main Street is yours. I should say in the state of Illinois. There's a bunch of them, I'm sure, except for the one in Springfield, Illinois. So here the Gemara says, I sold you all of the homes of Bar Sisin, but there was one to have a mikri debei Bar Sisin, and Omar Le, the seller said, Halav debei Bar Sisin. This actually isn't included in our Bei Bar Sisin sale. V'ikru Yehu de mikri debei Bar Sisin. Yes, it is called that, but no, it's really not a part of the sale. So let's say Rob and I go into business together. I tell him, I'm selling you all the 7-Elevens in the community, except for the one on Tui in California. So also the Kami de Rav Nachman, they brought the Shaila to Rav Nachman about that 11th property, that last 7-Eleven. What? 7-Eleven. Oh my gosh. I was corny without knowing it. I missed you. So the Gemara says they brought the Shiloh to Rav Nachman, and look what Rav Nachman did. Rav Nachman said, Ukma biyada de lokeach. The 11th property, that last 7-Eleven is included in my sale to Rav. Why? That this bar sisin is not part of the other bar sisin. You have to bring a raya for that. You don't just get to verbally declare it. If you're selling a group of things, I'm selling you all 7-Elevens, and then I verbally throw in, but not the one on 2. No, you got to prove that that's not part of the bar sisin. But Amar Le, Rava pushes back and says, Dina hachi. Rava says, really? Hamotzi mechavero olav araya. And these are flipped shitas from what we saw before between the lokeach and the mocher, and on our side, between the balabais and the squatter. So the Gemara responds with a relatively simple answer for both sides. Lamed Amid Aleph, a quarter of the way down. Kasha de Rava ad Rava, that's not, so then it just asks the question. Kasha de Rava ad Rava, Kasha de Rav Nachman ad Rav Nachman. The Gemara responds as follows. De Rava lo Kasha, Hasam mocher koi benichse. Hacha lokeach koi benichse. By the case of the bar sisin, the mocher lives on those properties. So that's why Rava holds what he holds, that hamotzi mechabel varaya. But hacha, in our case, what does our case mean? Our case is the case that we started with at the bottom of the page, the case of bar sisin. But hacha, our case, the one that we started with today at the beginning of the daf, which is 6 lines from the bottom, when I had said that I lived in the inner sanctum of the building. Hacha, in that case, lokeach koi benichse. I own the place. So therefore, it's not really a stira. The cases are just not comparable. And similarly, the Rav Nachman ad Rav Nachman nami lo kasha, because the cases are not comparable. Why not? Kevan de amar le de bar sisin u'mekarya de bar sisin aledi de ramya leguluye de lav de bar sisin lav de bar sisin he. That was like I said earlier, that if you are saying that I'm selling you all of the properties of bar sisin, and then you try to siphon off one of those properties, you can't do that unless you have a proof. In our case, the person who had the chazaka, he's no different than someone who's holding a shtar. Milo amrinan, don't we say to that person, go prove that your chazaka is real, and then you can have the property. So that's why these two shitas are not a stira between one another. All of that was case 1 with a kasha of Rava against Rava, Rav Nachman against Rav Nachman, and its answers to get rid of that stira. And 2/3 of the way down, the Gemara brings us to our second case of the day. Short, this one only is 6 lines. My boys behind Besa. What are you doing in my house, squatter? Amar le, the squatter says, Minoch zvinte ve'achalte shnei chazaka. You sold it to me, and I've lived here for 3 years. What did we say about the 3-year mark in halacha? What do you no longer need after the 3-year mark? Your shtar. We don't have a halachic obligation to hold on to the paperwork beyond 3 years. The chazaka line is a stark line. Once I hit 3 years, I don't have to prove anything. You have to prove me out. I don't have to prove me in. I'm allowed to live there now. So, it's 365 times 3. So it's 1,000+ days. That's getting to that point. Amar le, so the owner, the balabai, says back to the squatter, Bishuke Veroi Havai. I was in a marketplace in Japan across the globe. I was nowhere near America, and there was no way I could have watched. I could have given a macha that you were living in my property. Amar le, he catches him red-handed. That's not true, Mr. Balabas. I know for sure that you were back in town. Isli Sahade, I have witnesses about you. Dechol Shata, Hava Osis Tlosin Yome. You used to come back to Chicago every year for 30 days. You want to tell me you were in Japan for 3 years and you couldn't make a macha? Maybe you're right that when you come back, you can shut me down. But if you've been back and you didn't make a macha, that shows you don't mind that I live in your property. That's what the Gemara says. What? How did you get the keys to the door? Well, yeah, it was unlocked. They didn't have locks like we have nowadays. So Amar Le, the owner of the house, said, you're right. I was back in Chicago. You're right. But tlasin yome b'shukoy havataridna. I was busy. I was drowning in work. I had 0 time to come back home. I have had this happen in my travels, where sometimes I'm taking a connecting flight through Chicago to somewhere, and I don't have time to see my family. That's happened before. That's not 30 days. That's a long time, maybe. But back in the day where travel was more complicated, weather was much more of an issue. Maybe not even so true. We have weather issues now. Nevertheless, the Gemara says that this is a good svara. Amar Rava Paskins, like the Balabas, that Avid Inish to Kol Tlasin Yome Tar B'Shuka. It's very possible that a person could be just drowning in work for 30 days. When we think about Rabbi Akiva, who left his wife for 12 years and didn't even stop at home at the 12-year mark and went out for... These people had a different work ethic than we did. It's a totally different ballgame. They were like much higher than we were. That's story number 2. Story number 3, 3 lines from the bottom of Lamed Amar Aleph. My boys b'hai ara. What are you doing on my property, squatter? Amarle, mi planya zivinte. I bought it from, let's say I'm talking to Rob, like I said before. I bought it from Gerald, who bought it from Rob. Rob, you're complaining to me. Rob says, I want the field back. I want get off my ground, Phil. What are you doing here? I said, no. I bought it from Gerald. So the Gemara says, mi planya zvinte. I bought it from Ploni, which is Gerald. And de Amar li de Zavna Minach, who said that he bought it from Rob. So what does Rob say to me? Well, what did you just admit to me? That I was the original owner. Amar le, last line on Lamed Amud Aleph. T'lav kamodis, didn't you just admit, turning to the top of Lamed Amud Beis, didn't you just admit, the hai ara didili, you just admitted that it's my property. Va'ad lo zivinta minai, you didn't buy it from me. Zil, get away from me. La bal dvarim didiat. You're not the one who I sold to. Get out of my hair. Give me the property back. Amar Rava, this is a real svara. Dina ka'amar le. The balabais is allowed to say, Phil, get out of the mix and get off my property. Now, this assumes that I don't have paperwork that verifies that I purchased it properly, and that he doesn't have paperwork that he verified it properly. In those cases, Rob is allowed to make a claim against me. Case number 4 for the day, 3 lines down on Lamed Amud Beis. My bois b'hai ara, why are you squatting on my land? I bought it from somebody else. I didn't buy it from you. I bought it from Gerald, and I didn't bring back the line about Rob this time. This case is different. What are you talking about, Rob? I bought it from Gerald. It's easy. And I've been consuming food on this property for 3 years. Amarle, plan yagzal nohava. Rob says, you bought it from Gerald. The guy's a categorical thief. Steals real estate all the time. So that can't be that's a good thing. You bought from a thief. Amarle, Isli Sade, I said back to Rob, that's adorable, but I have a testimony against you, Rob. Rob, you're telling me that Gerald is a thief? I came and consulted with you, Rob, about whether or not I should buy this property. The Amrisli Zilzavin, you told me to buy it from Gerald. Don't come back and cry now. You can't do that. Rob, you told me to buy it from Gerald. So what do you mean he's a thief? The Gemara gives a wild answer. The Gemara says, Amar le, Hasheni noachli, harishon kasha hemenu. Rob says, I'd prefer to deal with the second guy than to deal with the first guy. Rob knows I'm Yashar. So Rob's like, yeah, Phil, go buy it from Gerald. And then Phil, I'll take you to Beis Din to get my property back. Because Phil's not a thief, and Gerald is a thief. By the way, I love you, Gerald. I presume you're not a thief. Just using you as a mashal here. So the Gemara says that this is a real answer. Amar Rava, Dina ka'amar le. This is the din. That's unbelievable to me that we could have such a harama that Rob can say, yes, I did tell you to use the thief because you're much easier to take to Beis Din because you're nice. So that's actually binding. And the Gemara says, wait 1 second. Come on. Whose shita is that we're allowed to do this wacky ha'arama? Says the Gemara, that's ke'admon. This is a shita that we saw in Maseches Ksubis. I'm sure we all remember it well, because I didn't when I saw this. That's not. We have a Mishnah. If there is a claim on a field, the chasum aleha be'ed, and it's signed by someone, admon omer hasheni noachli harishon kasha himenu. The svara that Admon gives is that I'm okay using the second guy who's less complicated. The chachamim omrim ibedes zechuso. We're not going to get into that case. We're just highlighting that this is a das yachid. It was a shita of one individual of Admon to apply and employ this rule of hasheni noachli harishon kasha himenu. So the Gemara is basically asking, why are you siding with Admon if he's a das yachid? The chachamim disagree with him, and we know the halachic principle, yachid v'rabim, halacha kirabim. So there's no reason why we should paskin like Admon. Why, Rava, did you just paskin like Admon? Says the Gemara, in our case, afilu tema rabbanon. In our case, it's not the same as the case of the machlokas between Admon and the chachamim. Let's distinguish. What's the difference between our case, where Rob tells me to buy from Gerald, knowing full well that Gerald's a thief because I'm an easier person to deal with? Afilu tema rabbanon, because hasam ovad le maisa. In the case of Admon and the Chachamim in that Mishnah, there was an action that was done, which was a chasima. It says v'chasum aleh be'ed. Aval hacha, it was only dibura where Rab said zil zevin. Therefore, there's a difference in the cases. In avid inish to mikri v'amar. It's a normal thing. Whether or not it's normal, I don't know. It's a permissible model that Rab used in order to deal with me instead of dealing with the thief known as Gerald. Case number 5, second of the wide lines, 2/3 of the way down on Lamed Amid Beis. My bias b'hayara. What are you doing in my field, squatter? Get out of here. Amar le, the squatter says, Mi planya zevinta. I bought it from Gerald. Ve'achalte shnei chazaka, similar frame as the previous case. I've already been here for 3 years. Amar le, he says, planya gzal nahava. He's a thief. Very similar still. A thief is a little bit different. Over there, the language was not that he was a thief. What was his crime? The Gemara says that he was, it is the same. It's Gazlanu. Yeah. And then Omar Le, 6 lines from the bottom. Wait a second. Rab, to Asis Be'urta. There are witnesses that said that you came over to my house last night. You should sell it to him. Same story. Omar Le, Amina. This is a different story now. What's Rab saying? You're right, I told you that. And the reason that I'm approaching you now is because Amina is bundinoy. I'm just going to buy my own property. Really what happened is that Rob there's red tape. You got to go to Bezdin, you got to fill this out, you got to write a check, whatever. It's complicated. Rob's like, forget it. I'm flush with cash. I'm just going to rebuy my own property. Okay, it's just easier. I'm rich. It's fine. I'm rich. Hashem should bless you to be rich. That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, yeah, Taka, that works. We accept that in halacha. That if someone says, I was just trying to rebuy my own property because it's pashut easier, that's allowed. People do try to rebuy their own things just to avoid the red tape of repurchasing. Every one of these cases is hours of work, but again, we're getting the baseline of these principles that I'm allowed to try and buy back my own property yesterday, and then today kick you off my ground. That's mutter. That's not a problem. Man says to his friend, my bais b'hai ara. What are you doing on my land, squatter? Amar le mi planya zvina. I bought it from Gerald. Ve'achalte shnei chazak, and I've been there for 3 years. Amar le, that can't be. V'hanekit nashtara zavni le mine ha'arba ishnei. This other guy says, what? Oh, no, this was purchased 4 years ago. So Amar le, I know it was purchased 4 years ago. I didn't mean to say that I've only been here for 3 years. When I told you about Chalte Shnei Chazaka, I didn't mean that I was only here for 3 years. You thought when I said that I've been here for 3 years, I meant literally 3 years? No. Shnei Chazaka Tuva Ka'amina. I've been here for many years, a minimum of 3. Amar Rava, absolutely. That is a totally normal turn of phrase. Avide inshi dekar l'shnei tuva, shnei chazaka. A person could say, I've been here for as long as a chazaka. I don't mean 3. It could be 53 years. Just they're saying, I've been there long enough for a chazaka. Back off. That's really what he's saying. I don't need to start anymore. It's been 3 years. But in our case, v'hani mili that's only true to achla sheva. The reason why in this case it had to be that the squatter was there for 7 years was that he needed a chazaka before the claim that someone bought it 4 years ago. So if there's a claim that someone bought it 4 years ago, then the shnei tuva, the years that the squatter had to be there was 7 years ago. So there was a 3-year chazaka prior to the claim that someone bought it 4 years ago, and then you're good to go. Dekadim chazaka dehai l'shtarahach. We had to beat out the star with a 3-year chazaka. Aval, turning to the top of Lamed Aleph, and heading to the 2 dots, 6, 7 lines from the bottom of the page. Aval shis, if it's only been 6 years, ein lecha mecha gedol mizu. That's not enough time for a chazaka, for you, the squatter, to make a claim and you lose. Let's say, and this is our 7th case, and it's going to get us into a lamdisha sugya, which I wish we had more time to do slowly, because even the language is confusing, because it's just a lot of repetitious, similar phrases. But let's learn it as clearly as we can. Ze omer shelavosai, ze omer shelavosai. Now Michael and I are having an argument, and he says this belonged to my father, and I said it belongs to my father. Hi, I see sade de avhasehi. And Michael brings a raya. He brings Adim that Taka, the property, was his father's. V'hai, and I bring a different raya. V'hai, I see sade de ach l'shnei chazaka. So now we have Adim against the chazaka. Who wins? This is great. This is Lam de Torah. Who wins? Michael's 2 Eidim are my Shnei Chazaka, my squatting 3 years uninterrupted, 365 days for 3 years running. Nobody came. I was a total loner. Nobody showed up on the property. No ir-or, no claims, nothing. So we have a pure Chazaka against Edus. Omar Rabba, Rabba says, who wins? Phil wins. Phil, who says that it was a Chazaka, beats out the Edus. Why? Why would you say that? Isn't Edus Trey Kimeya? Edus in halacha, a person can get married, can get divorced, can be paskin that they're not alive. Edus is huge. How can a chazaka be bigger than Edus? Says the Gemara, maybe it is or maybe it isn't. But in this case, Rabbah says, fourth line, malo l'shaker. We have what we call in halacha a migu. The claim that I made is a lesser claim for sure. A chazaka on paper is less than Edim. However, it has to be true that I said it's a chazaka. Why? Because if I was lying, I would have said a better lie. If I was lying, I could have claimed something else. Like we saw in the last 6 cases. If I wanted to win this argument, I could have lied through my teeth and said, Michael, I bought this from you. What are you talking about? And I've lived there for 3 years, and Michael would have lost in a second. So the fact that I claim chazaka means I'm not lying. Migu, that if it was a lie, I would have said a better lie. It must be I'm not lying. So mali l'shaker. So that is the shita of Rabbah. Amar le Abaye. Abaye says, I hear you that the chazaka claim is a migu against Edus. I hear you. However, and let's remember historically, Abaye was a 4th century Amora. Rabbah was his Rebbe. And he pushes back on his Rebbe, and his Rebbe agreed. Look what happened. Amar le Abaye. Mali l'shaker, I agree, but not b'makom Edim. B'makom Edim lo amrinan. Amigu doesn't work when there's Edim involved. Amigu works when there's stam ne'emanus shilas. You don't know if I'm telling the truth. I'm just making a claim. The property's mine because I have a chazaka. They say, you have a chazaka? You say, yeah, you should believe me because I could have made a better lie. Okay, fine. Then the migu wins. But migu b'makom Edim, mali l'shakir b'makom Edim lo amrinan. Okay, fine. So therefore, we don't see this in the Gemara, but the Rishonim explain that, and if you look at the Rashi, Dibra Maskal Amar Le, look at the last words of Rashi Amar Le. It's about 10 lines down. The halacha ke'abaye, shehare Rabba hodelo kedemuchach va'azil. Rabba ended up agreeing with him that Taka, it's true, that Mali l'shaker, a migu, doesn't work when there are Edim. Even though it's a chazaka plus the migu, we don't care. We don't care. It doesn't work for Makom Edim. Now, let's say, Hadar Amar Le, let's say there was a secondary claim. You're right, this is me talking to Michael now. De'av hasachi uzvanta minach. You're right, I'm changing my claim now. I'm not saying chazak anymore. It was your dad's. However, I bought it from you. The hai de'amri lach de'av hasi. Why did I say that it was my father's? The samich le Allah ki de'av hasi. In my bones, I felt so connected to the property. Whatever the svar is, I felt that it was like my father's. So here's the lamdish shayla that we're going to ask now. Toin, I made it claim A, and then v'chozer v'toin, I come back a few minutes later and I make claim B, and it's different. Do we say toin v'chozer v'toin, or ein toin v'chozer v'toin, or are you not allowed to go back and change your claim? This is what we call perjury in English. If you perjure yourself, is your new claim valid in the face of your old claim? In American law, it invalidates you. You've perjured yourself, you're cooked. But halachically, if I have Taina A, and then I come back and I change to Taina B, how does it work? My daughter said to me today, I did a lemonade stand with my brother. He left early. I worked more time than he did. I should get more money. And then I figured out the math. And then she said, well, actually, it's more like I'm the manager, and her language. This was so cute. It's more like I'm the manager and he's the project manager. So I should get more. I said, you're changing your tune here. A minute ago, it was about hours of labor. Now it's about rank and hierarchy. Which one of your arguments is real? I don't even know which one you mean. That was our conversation. It happened to be tonight, right after I got home from preparing Daf Yomi. Do we say toin v'chozer v'toin, that I can perjure myself and my second claim is valid? Or do we say ein toin v'chozer v'toin? This is a machlokes amoraim. Says the Gemara, third of the way down. Ula amar toin v'chozer v'toin, no problem. You're allowed to go back. Nardoi amre ein toin, eino toin v'chozer v'toin, you're not allowed to go back. And then each side of this machlokes agrees that there are spaces where their rule doesn't apply. Umode Ula, Ula who says that you're allowed to go back on your claim, he says that I agree you're not allowed to go back in the following cases. Umode Ula hechad amar le shalavosai v'shalavosecha. If I say that it's mine and it's not your father's, de'eno toin v'chozer v'toin. When your new claim perfectly contradicts your previous claim, you cannot do that. Even Ula, who allows for a second claim to replace the first, that's not true if it's an opposite, opposing claim. It's only true if it's complementary. If I'm in Bezdin and I did not make the claim that I should have made, let's say I had a beautiful claim, I'll call it claim C. Claim C would have been great, but I forgot to say it in Bezdin. The awesome avroi, and then I'm outside of Bezdin, and then I run back and wait, Your Honor, I forgot to make the best claim. Even Ula, who's a mekel, who says toin v'chozer v'toin, will not allow one to go back and make a claim after you leave the room. You're done. You close the door of the bezdin. You cannot go back. Oh, wait, I forgot something. Come prepared with your arguments, because if you're not prepared, you can't come back in after it's over. Similar, it's like, I don't know, whatever the rules are in American law, double jeopardy, whatever those kinds of similar, I don't know if that's the right phrase here, but it's that kind of a rule. My taima, because ta'ante, agmare, you made your claim, you're done. Goodbye, get out of my courtroom, you're done. And what about Nahardai, who said, Eino toin v'chozer v'toin? They agreed, umodu Nahardai, that hechad amar le shalavosai shalakchuha me'avosecha, the chozer v'toin, that my father bought from your father. That's why it's my father's. I'm adding information. He agrees that if all you're doing is supplementing and adding information, no problem at all. That's okay. That's not the case of chozer v'toin v'chozer, or toin v'chozer v'toin, such that Nahardoi would say that it's not allowed. They agree that that's okay. That's the chozer v'toin. The hecha as well, the ishtoi mili avroi. Let's say he goes outside and he's talking to his family, and v'lo ta'an, v'asa lebeidina. I'm sorry, let me go back a second. Let's say the two Baalei Din, let's say Michael and I are talking outside of Bezdin, we're shooting the breeze. The Lotan, I held back my perfect claim, my claim letter C. I didn't say anything. We already talked. He knows what I think, I know what he thinks, we talked. But I left out my going for the jugular kind of argument. And the Gemara says, V'asa lebeidin v'ta'an dechozer v'ta'an, and I come back and I make that new claim, the claim C, which may be different than what Michael and I spoke about outside the courthouse, that, even according to Nahardai, is mutter. Why? My taima? Because that's normal. You got to keep an ace up your sleeve. If you're a lawyer going into court, you don't disclose all of the questions you plan on asking in your cross-examination. Because if you do that, you're giving way too much lead time for the other lawyers to combat. Amar Ameimar, Ana Naharda, Ana. I am from Naharda. The Sfira Li, the Toin v'chozer v'toin. I disagree with this Gemara, says Ameimar. The Shita of Ulo is Toin v'chozer v'toin. You can go back on yourself a little bit. The Shita of Naharda was that you cannot. Ameimar's like, I'm from Naharda and I disagree with this Gemara. I don't hold like the Naharda of the Gemara. I hold Toin v'chozer v'toin, v'hilchasa Toin v'chozer v'toin. We'll stop right here at the two dots. Emir Tashem will pick up on Shabbos an hour before Mincha. Wishing you all a beautiful night.